Renewable Energy Group in Ames, Iowa. He has a PhD and a master's degree in organic chemistry from Iowa State and a BS in polymer chemistry from University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. I want to mention this is such an exciting thing to have Mark with us. Early Charm is in Baltimore, but Mark is in the process of moving to Chicago. He'll be continuing in his role at Early Charm, but lucky us, he's going to be doing it from our region. Mark, thanks for being here, and I mean here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's dive right in. Unlike many venture capital, early Charm is unique. Unlike many venture capital influenced accelerators and studios, Early Charm doesn't aim for quick exits, doesn't with the fail fast mentality. Um, Tell us how you build companies.
Yeah. We're unique in a lot of different ways, kind of including in the nomenclature that we use for ourselves, venture builder, venture studio. I think there's a lot of different flavors that you can compare us to, but there hasn't been anything else that I've seen that is exactly like an Early Charm. So I'm actually going to step back from the how we build companies to the why we build companies. So we actually start with kind of a thesis of we believe that venture creation is really an opportunity to do real lasting economic development. We're not actually located in Baltimore by accident. Our co-founders were one of them was from Atlanta, one of them was from Pittsburgh, and they were actually in Hattiesburg, Mississippi when they came up with the idea in about 2010 or so to launch a venture studio with the idea of driving economic development. And they looked around the country and they said, what makes sense to kind of start this program out? And they picked Baltimore specifically because, it's a Rust Belt city, right? There was a lot of manufacturing that had left, especially in the early 80s. The steel plants, people think of Pittsburgh as being a real big steel town, but Baltimore actually had the highest percentage of workers who were tied to the steel industry post World War II than any city, right? So there was a really big opportunity space for somebody to come in and help fill that from an economic development point of view. Traditional venture creation, if you do like the venture startup where you're just flipping companies, it works for a lot of technology development. I'm not here to say like the typical VC 10-year fund is not a good way to build companies. It's a great way to build companies, but it doesn't have economic development against the entire diaspora of people who might be in a community, right? And when we talk about like place-based economic development, you're really talking about things like manufacturing. You're really talking about things like hard tech, right? So Early Charm took that thesis and backed up and said, all right, where is there really opportunities to build companies in hard tech? And it's at the university level, right? That there's all these types of really great innovations that are coming out of universities that are, quite frankly, sitting on the shelves of tech transfer offices, right? The valley of death, such that it exists, and I think we might have a chance to talk about that a little bit later. But the valley of death, such that it exists, seems to sit right at that point of saying, hey, there's all this opportunity to bring tech out of universities and actually build long-lasting, sustaining companies, right? So our approach then is a little bit different, though. If you're working on hard tech and working on creating sustainable companies that aren't necessarily going to flip, you're really working with things that have long development timelines. So a 10-year fund or something like that VC works for maybe drug development or software isn't going to work for a part on a widget that's going to go on an airplane, for instance, right? And that's not a hypothetical. We do work with like aerospace, and we do actually have technologies that are in our pipeline that we've been told, they're 10 years away from testing, right? So in order for that to work, the way that we build companies is we have a synergistic approach where we have a portfolio of companies that all come up together. It really helps dilute the risk across the entire portfolio, and it allows us to work, with whatever area is particularly hot on a given day, right? So you're able to have a steady workforce, and you're able to have a lot of talent retention without having to worry about, are we going to run out of runway on XYZ in the next year or two. We're able to actually build sustainable companies that way with the idea of being manufacturers at the end of the day. And so that's the other part that really makes us very different than the VC, is that we're not actually looking for exits at all. So we've started 54 companies at Early Charm. 38 are still under management. 4 have exited, if you want to call it that. And 12 have since dissolved. So it's kind of flipping the idea of a traditional hit rate of 10% to 90% fail rate. We're about 75% success, and what success means isn't necessarily going to be $100 million. It might just mean that you're producing tens or dozens or hundreds of parts a year of something, but we're actually able to manufacture things sustainably in this way, right? So yeah, it's a completely different way of looking at venture creation than the VC model. But it allows us to really build sustainable businesses for generations in the future.
You are helping with the funding of the companies, but you're not using venture capital, right?
Yeah. Not traditional venture capital for most of our companies. So the 4 companies that I mentioned that are 54 minus 12, if you can do that math, it's 42. So 38 companies still under management, 4 that have kind of exited. Those 4 have taken venture capital money, so it does happen, but that's not usually what we want to do, and there's a bunch of different reasons for that. The money that we do recruit tends to be federal investments. Certainly SBIR is certainly part of what we do. So one of the reasons why we structure the startups as startups is because we can certainly attract that. But the better money that we tend to target is strategic investment. So we're really looking at manufacturers who are in whatever space that we are targeting to say, hey, this is what we're making. Come along with us as we make this, and we're going to make something that's really the right fit for you, right? So for those aerospace manufacturers, again, I'll go back to that example, because they have to engage very early with us. They might give us a $200 contract to start with developing a technology that is directly out of a university. And then 10 years later, then they give us the next check for $5 million, right? And again, that's not a hypothetical. That exact process has happened with us, that it's very small investment up front, and then a little bit bigger investment, and then there's going to be another tranche of investment after that. So it kind of steps up in that way. And those strategic investors are the ones who are able to be a little bit more patient with us as we go through that process as well, right? So yeah, VC money is not necessarily what we're targeting. Sometimes companies get to a stage where you just have to have that accelerant, and it makes sense to do that. But most of the time, because we're trying to build things that are going to last for a really long time, strategic investment tends to be more what we're looking at.
You have a team of 40 plus people that works on building these companies. What kind of work do they do? What are their roles?
Yeah, everything. So that's another thing that keeps us maybe apart from a traditional studio, as opposed to a team coming into the studio. The way that we do it is that we work with the inventor, who is usually a university professor who has a great idea, but we say, we want to keep you in the lab and inventing, right? So we're going to take the technology, start the company around it. We have engineers, scientists. We have something like 12 PhDs on staff. We have a lot of technicians on staff, back office support. So it is everything that is involved with running a company. We assign to take that startup, take that piece of technology, turn it into a company, and run it from there.
So people are probably thinking, how do you pay for all those people working on it? You set it up so that you own a majority of the company you're building, and you're often extending a line of credit to the company. You make money in that. What's your rationale for taking that majority ownership?
Yeah, it's because we are the ones who are actually taking on the risk of running the company. So we really like that inventor being involved, and the inventor is oftentimes, not in every case, but the inventor is oftentimes part of the cap table, and we encourage that. But at the end of the day, if anybody's worked with the professor, they know that they're doing a million things. They're not actually working in the company, right? So we're the ones who take it and run with it. And you mentioned that we extend them a line of credit. In some ways, you can think of our companies as business units in a larger company, right? So it's not that necessarily that they have a line of credit, they have an operating budget. And we assign that operating budget as is appropriate. And there are some technology areas are going to be hotter than others, and there's going to be shorter sight lines to actually getting to manufacturing, so that operating budget can change, right? Again, if you're doing the math on that, 40 employees, 38 companies, that we don't necessarily have all these companies fully staffed all the time. It doesn't make sense to do that. It's again really playing off the time element of the way that we work and using that as a resource rather than using that as a hindrance, saying that we're going to be super, super patient with these, and we're going to make sure that we're as capital efficient as possible while we get to market.
I want to say if people have questions, feel free to jump in. And actually, Tim Honecker had a question. Tim, do you want to come in and ask, or do you want me to ask it? Well, I'll ask it. Do you work with the Defense Department?
Oh yeah, a lot. So especially recently, obviously with the changes in the federal government, I would say prior to this year, our biggest federal contracts were with the DOE. This year, it's already becoming pretty obvious that that's going to be DoD for the foreseeable future, right? So biomanufacturing is one that in particular, and Baltimore is very close to CBC, which Chem Bio Center, which does a lot of biomanufacturing for chemicals for national defense, right? And they're already showing pretty big investments into those types of companies. And again, aerospace, certainly we have DoD contracts from small SBIR to a little bit bigger DARPA, to being, we're not usually a prime on just about anything, but we will sub on those big primes, right? So the Boeings of the world, the Lockheed Martins, all those kinds of large primes will come to us, especially if they need a small, because we do qualify as a small. Will come to us and say, hey, can you be a sub on XYZ contract? So we do also have those type of capabilities. And DOE is the exact type of patient money that we oftentimes need in a lot of cases. So the DoD can be that strategic investor in a lot of cases for many of our technologies.
Catherine from Titletown Tech is asking, how do you instill founder mentality when you're holding majority ownership?
Yeah, I think that's it's a really good question of there's this kind of belief when you do a startup that you have to live and die by the startup in order for it to be successful. And for most startups, that is absolutely the case. That if you're not living and breathing it, the startup's going to die. We take a little bit different view of it, and we say like, hey, if you can just be opportunistic with this startup, you're actually going to increase the chance of success. But again, you're going to increase the timeline. So the founder mentality is probably not as strong with the early charm companies. The founders that we work with, and every single company that we have, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, every single company that we have represents a university technology license or a national lab technology license. So we license the technology. It has an inventor with it, but that inventor usually fades away, and then we just operate it like it's a business unit. So it isn't quite the same type of live and die by the technology as a traditional startup. In most cases, there's always exceptions. Sometimes there's going to be a startup that, like I said, it needs that VC money, needs that accelerant, and needs that founder mentality, right? And in that case, it's the only time that we have CEOs is if we're attracting VC money, because then we will put a CEO into that company and say that is now what your life is. So we certainly will do that approach if it's appropriate to do that. But most of our companies, that's not the pathway that they take.
We said earlier, Early Charm is based in Baltimore, but you're in the process of moving to Chicago. So you'll be in Chicago doing what for Early Charm? And can people, especially universities, approach you with some of their technologies, et cetera?
I hope they do. Yeah, absolutely. That is a large part of why I'm relocating to the Midwest, is because the same types of opportunities that brought us to Baltimore in the first place exist in a lot of, especially in the Midwest, but across the entire country, right? And we are regionally agnostic in where we engage. We've started companies from technologies from the University of Hawaii would be the farthest away that we've done, but we've done University of Boulder, Arizona. Yeah, we're certainly not locked into only doing our model in Baltimore itself, right? So yeah, I'm really excited to be in the area and be able to engage in a meaningful way with the universities and the strategics that are certainly that fit the early charm model very well in the Midwest. And also, I'm from Green Bay myself, so it's a little bit of a homecoming for me as well.
You're going to have to get Catherine to give you a tour of Titletown Tech.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Do you want to give us a few examples of how you've worked with university technologies?
Yeah, so the best way to do it is to kind of understand a little bit of our portfolio. So we're, hard tech is very broad, but where we're strongest is in material design. So if there's things that synergize very well with our portfolio, we're happy to talk to professors, to researchers, tech transfer offices, and say, hey, is your technology the right fit for us to license into our company? And then we'll start a company around it. Again, that first money in is probably going to be SBIR size check money, not necessarily SBIR, but that type of size check. In addition to the operating budget that Early Charm is going to assign to it, which is pretty small pre-money into it, because again, we engage very, very early. We're talking TRL, 2, 3. We will take that company and we'll start running with it, right? So
TRL being technology readiness level. Right?
technology readiness level, yep. Things that exist on the benchtop or sometimes just in the professor's brain. We're happy to engage already at that level if it makes sense for us to be going out and reaching out to partners and strategics at that time. We're happy to come in and help facilitate that. So yeah, if the professor wants to take the company and run with it themselves, go ahead and do that. That's probably not an early charm company though. An early charm company is the professor who just says like, hey, I recognize this needs a startup. It's not ready to be licensed to a big company, but I'm not going to take it myself. So for those types of opportunities, early charm can certainly help you out.
And what verticals, what areas of technology what's your sweet spot?
Yeah, anything that's going to end in something production at the end of the day is what we're interested in. It's a little bit harder to answer the question other than that, because we do have some SaaS technologies that's pretty rare, but we have SaaS technologies as long as it applies to something manufacturing related. So Titletown Tech, certainly we have some things to talk about with that, but mostly what we have is things like new manufacturing methods. We do a lot of electrospinning stuff, for instance. Biomanufacturing is something that we're getting into for a lot of material stuff. Some nano manufacturing methods, some advanced manufacturing. So we like those platform type technologies and things that can be added into it. And again, that's because that fits kind of that niche type of production that we're targeting at the end. It's unlikely that we're going to be doing, billion-dollar plants at the end of our tech development. When we're licensing a tech, we're really looking at it and saying, is there a $50 million market at the end of this, right? So, as long as the market is right, as long as we have the right expertise in it, again, we have 12 PhDs, we don't have a million. So as long as we have a PhD who knows something about that, then we're happy to kind of take it in and see what we can do with it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing the Early Charm story. And it's so exciting that you're going to be in Chicago and near all of our great universities. So
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.